Church life is full of imagery of shepherds and sheep. Most people can recite part of, if not all, of the 23rd Psalm by heart. That most famous prayer of confession, based on Isaiah 53, honestly describes how we are all sheep and have gone astray, each to his own way. Peter's rehabilitation at the end of John's gospel, when Jesus commands him, happens when Jesus commands him to feed my lambs and tend my sheep and feed my sheep. We refer to the minister of our churches as pastors, which is from the Latin word which means shepherd. And the congregation is often referred to as the flock. Being human, then, we are all very much like sheep in the world. And I know that can be insulting for some. Despite our great mental capacities and our inborn rational abilities, the reality is we are like sheep because we are so easily led astray. Billy Graham, the great preacher, said, "We follow the crowd. We are helpless when we are attacked, especially if we are attacked by fear. Without guidance, we wander aimlessly through life, searching for green pastures and stumbling over rocks." How true are those words as we look around at the people we see every day, and even more true when we look in the mirror. Yes, my friends, sad to say, but it's true. We are sheep. And as insulting as it may seem, no sane person among us can seriously look in the mirror without admitting that we are too easily led astray. In fact, I rather enjoy a term used by a friend of mine who proclaimed that we humans really are sheeple. We are a people of followers. We want to follow one crowd or another, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad. Even those unique individuals who seem to be true leaders among us, impervious to the whims of the world's crowds, are in reality themselves followers. They follow either the one true God or some other god of their own invention. Or all too often, they alternate between the two, whichever is convenient in the moment. No, it's not a pretty picture when we look at ourselves. It's not a pretty picture when we look at the world around us and our fellow sheeple. It's not a pretty picture when we realize just how sheep-like we are in the way we live our lives. Now, Jesus spoke to the people about what they knew and what was common to them. And so this is why he uses the image of sheep. When you're in Israel, and as I was a few months ago, everywhere you go, you see flocks of sheep and shepherds out there. So they would have been familiar with this imagery. They would have seen it for themselves. In fact, many of the people listening probably were shepherds themselves. But we are a people who are now far from the shepherding culture of first century Palestine. Fewer of us than ever know much about farming, and the reality is here in Oklahoma, we live in cattle country. Growing up on a dairy farm myself, I have to admit that some of these shepherding images were a little challenging for me in my childhood because we didn't have sheep either. So you need to understand what's happening here. There were two types of sheepfolds in Jesus' day. In the towns were the larger, more public sheepfolds, where one or more flocks could be kept at once. When it was time for the shepherd to lead his sheep to the pasture, he would call them, and the sheep would follow the shepherd's voice. In the country, there was another type of sheepfold, apparently a little more than just a circle of rocks with an opening. At night, the shepherd would herd the sheep into the circle of rocks and then sleep himself in the opening in order to guard the sheep. In a sense, the shepherd was the gate of the sheepfold, and this was a common imagery for them. So who among us is surprised then to hear Jesus refer to himself as the good shepherd? Apparently the Pharisees didn't understand what he was driving at the beginning of this text as he told them the first parable. And so Jesus told that simple parable again with a few changes, reminding them that, okay, if you don't understand me as the shepherd, then I am the gate for the sheep, he told them. And when Jesus said that, you can understand that the leaders got a clearer understanding of his meaning. The people are sheep. They would agree with that. And Jesus was the leader, and the leaders of the temple and the other groups, including the would-be messiahs that had come before him, were all rival shepherds. If Jesus is the door, where does that leave everyone else, i.e. the leaders of the Jewish people? They would have understood exactly what he was saying. We can read this parable in two ways then. First, Jesus is the good shepherd who enters by the door instead of going around the back and sneaking in. Jesus is the good shepherd. His sheep recognize his voice, and the gatekeeper knows who he is. He's not a stranger, he's not a thief, he's not a bandit, but he is the one who speaks with authority and then is willing to lay down his life for his sheep. The second way of looking at this is that Jesus also is the door by which we go in and go out. This door offers salvation, or, in the imagery of our text, the difference between good pasture and bad pasture, of abundant life and a life without abundance. Jesus stands over and against those who offer another way of living. He stands there and he claims, "I am the good shepherd" in verse 11, and "I am the door" later on. He calls us by name. He calls us his sheep because he is our good shepherd. He shows us the way to an abundant life because he is the way. Certainly we are sheep, but we must ask of ourselves the great question: who is our shepherd? Like real sheep, we are compelled by our nature to follow someone or something. Unlike real sheep, we have been blessed with perhaps, or maybe burdened, with a free will to choose what shepherd we will follow. Every day, then, we must remind ourselves that we are indeed sheep. We are followers by nature. And every day we must ask, who is our shepherd? What is it that we are choosing to follow? Because I believe that the failure of this world, the failure of our world is not that we cannot choose, but rather that we choose the wrong way. It's not that we can't control guns. It's not that we can't control the media. It's not that we can't control the internet. It's not that we can't control our hatred. It's not that we can't control our tempers. It's not that we can't control our desires. The failure of us in this world is that so many have chosen to follow those wrong shepherds, and just as importantly, too many of those who have chosen the right shepherd have failed to claim that role as the shepherds themselves. Friends, there are a lot of lost sheep in the world, and we have ignored them for far too long. How many other extreme leaders, like Osama bin Laden, Adolf Hitler, David Koresh, take any number of ones, and there's plenty more in this world today who you can name for yourselves. How many of them have chosen to lead their flocks in the wrong direction? And consider how many within their flock so willingly follow them into doom and destruction. But it isn't just men like them that we can imagine. There are plenty of men and women who are every bit as false shepherds as Jesus would warn us against. With access to constant stream of information today, good and bad news, both real and fake, our heads are being constantly filled with the opinions of people who seem to make good sense in the moment, or at least make good sense as we see it. But are they really the people we should be following? Are they really the ones that we should trust with the questions of our world and the questions of our lives? Are they really the good shepherds they think that they are? It's easy to whip people into a frenzy. Charismatic leaders often do. But how often has the crowd listening to a leader become a mob? How often does a gathering of people become a riot, or perhaps worse? Friends, we all need to ask of ourselves, how discerning am I really when I listen to those who would tell me what I should think or what I should do? Just importantly, how discerning are you when you speak to people and expect them to listen to you? Every one of us is capable of leading other people astray. Have you ever considered the horrifying possibility of how often you led impressionable people away from the path of Christ? I know I have, and it is frightening. And yet that's the responsibility that we have taken on. We who call ourselves Christians, by definition Christ-like ones, we who have claimed to be followers and disciples of Jesus Christ, have been called to take on the mantle of Jesus Christ, to pick up his cross and follow where he leads. And by nature, then, people will follow us. Are you paying attention to where you are leading them? Are you paying attention to what it means to be a good shepherd? Are you paying attention to what Jesus would have you do so that you might lead others in the way of Christ? Jesus Christ came into the world to gather us into his flock. Like a good shepherd, he loves us. He calls us by name. And he is willing to die in order to sustain us and to save us. He speaks the truth always. Plenty of other would-be leaders can and have claimed just as much as Jesus. But do they really serve us? Or do they serve only themselves? Jesus came to serve and not be served. He gave his life, and without it, he has given us eternal life. His word has been given and should not be contradicted. As you listen to all those voices out there filling the world with noise, how will you discern who and what you should follow? Friends, we must listen for the voice of Christ. He is the only way and the only truth and the only real life. This world in which we live is filled with thieves and bandits who would seek to snatch us and the flocks away from Christ. So you had better be listening carefully and asking yourself, who is this person primarily serving? This person who deigns to be a leader among we, the sheeple of God, are they serving us, or are they serving only themselves? How closely aligned are they with Jesus and Jesus' words when they speak? And do their actions and attitudes reflect the life and the ministry of Jesus Christ? Or have they begun to follow after some other shepherd of their own making? Usually the one in the mirror. Do they truly seek to lead us in paths of righteousness? Or are they like the thieves who would lead us down the path of destruction? Friends, yes, we are sheeple. But we are only sheeple because we have given up our ability to use the minds that God has given us, because we have given up the ability to choose and discern wisely. Jesus proclaimed himself to be the good shepherd so that he might be the example of what we should be ourselves, and if not, at the very least, what we should be following. If you're not following the people and the way that is in line with Jesus Christ, then friends, you have become the ugly sheeple who have willingly given up your God-given right to discern the truth and have chosen to follow falsehood. Friends, we must commit ourselves as the people of God fully to being members of Jesus' flock. We must learn the sound of his voice. We must learn his ways, and we must follow only him, even if we do temporarily follow leaders in this world. Friends, you must ask God every day to silence the voices of those who would lead you away from the path that Christ has chosen for you. And every day ask and proclaim, whose sheep am I? Am I in the flock of Jesus Christ, following him and his voice and his example? Or am I the sheeple of another flock, following after the false leaders, the thieves, and the bandits? The question is simple, and the question is hard. But you must be willing to ask it, and you must be willing to answer. Whose sheep